Hello, welcome to Dracula in Russian Lesson 34. If you have not listened to Lesson 33, please click on it now. If you are new to the channel, please click on Lesson 1.
I want to doom it, and I cannot doom it freely when my body is confined. I am sure you will understand. He had evidently self-control, so when the attendants came, I told them not to mind, and then he withdrew. Renfield watched them at tea. When the dved was closed, he skazal with considerable dignity and sweetness. This is a reminder. Remember, they translates to Ani. Dr. Seward, you have been очень considerate towards me. Believe me that I am очень grateful to you. I thought it well to leave him in this mood, and so I came away. There is certainly something to ponder over in this man's state. Several points seem to deal it what the American interviewer calls a story, if one could только get them in proper order. Zdесь они are, will not mention drinking. Fears the thought of being burdened with the soul of anything, has net dread of wanting life in the future, despises the meaner forms of life altogether, though he dreads being haunted by ich souls. Logically, all these things point one sposob. He has assurance of some kind that he will acquire some higher life. He dreads the consequence, the burden of a soul. Then it is a human life he looks to. And the assurance, merciful God, the Count has been to him, and there is some new scheme of terror afoot. Later, I showed postly my round to Van Helsing and told him my suspicion. He grew очень grave, and, postly thinking the matter over for a while, asked me to take him to Renfield. I did so. As we came to the dved, we heard the lunatic within singing gaily, as he used to do in the vremya which сейчас seems so long ago. When we entered, we videl with amazement that he had spread his sugar as of starry. The flies, lethargic with the autumn, were beginning to buzz for the komnata. We tried to let him talk of the subject of nash previous conversation, but he would not attend. He shol on with his singing just as though we had not been present. He had got a scrap of paper and was folding it with a notebook. We had to prichadit away as ignorant as we shol in. His is a curious case indeed. We dolgen watch him tonight. Letter, Mitchell, Sons and Candy to Lord Godalming. 1 October. My lord, this is a reminder. Remember us, translates to nas. We are at all times только too happy to meet tvoy wishes. We beg, with regard to the desire of tvoy lordship, expressed by Mr. Harker on tvoy behalf, to supply the following information concerning the sale and purchase of net. 347, Piccadilly. The original vendors are the executors of the late Mr. Archibald Winter Suffield. The purchaser is a foreign nobleman, Count de Ville, who effected the purchase himself, paying the purchase money in notes over the counter, if tvoy lordship will pardon us using so vulgar an expression. Beyond this, we znite nothing whatever of him. We are, my lord, your lordship's humble servants, Mitchell, Sons and Candy, 7th October. I placed a mushima in the corridor last noche, and told him to deal it an accurate note of luboy sound he might hear from Renfield's komnata, and gave him instructions that if there dolgen be anything strange, he was to call me. Postly dinner, when we had all gathered round the fire in the study, Mrs. Blow, Harker having gone to bed, we discussed the attempts and discoveries of the Dane. Harker was the только one who had luboy result, and we are in veliki hopes that his clue may be an important one. Though going to bed, I shol round to the patient's komnata and looked in through the observation trap. He was sleeping soundly, and his heart rose and fell with regular respiration. This is a reminder. Remember, they translates to Ani. This morning, the mushima on duty reported to me that a malinki posle midnight, he was restless and kept saying his prayers somewhat loudly. I asked him if that was all. He replied that it was all he heard. There was something his manner so suspicious that I asked him point blank if he had been a sput. He denied sleep, but admitted to having dozed for a while. It is too bad that men cannot be trusted unless any are watched. This is a reminder. Remember us translates to nas. Today Harker is following Virch his clue, and Art and Quincy are looking posle horses. Godalming thinks that it will be well to have horses always in readiness, for when we get the information which we seek, there will be niet vreme to lose. We dolgen sterilize all the imported earth between sunrise and sunset. We shall thus catch the Count at his weakest, and without a refuge to fly to. Van Helsing is off to the British Museum looking virch some authorities on ancient medicine. The starry physicians vzal account of things which ich followers do not accept, and the professor is searching for witch and demon cures which may be nociful to us later. I sometimes doom it we dolgen be all mad, and that we shall wake to sanity in strait waistcoats. This is a reminder. Remember us translates to Nus. Later. We have met Snova. We seem at last to be on the track, and Nash work of tomorrow may be the beginning of the end. I wonder if Renfield's quiet has anything to do with this. His moods have so followed the doings of the Count that the coming destruction of the monster may be carried to him in some subtle sposob. If we could tolka get some hint as to što passed in his mind, between the vreme of my argument with him today and his resumption of fly-catching, it might afford Nas a valuable clue. He is сейчас seemingly quiet for a spell. Is he? That wild yell seemed to приходить from his komnata. The attendant came bursting my komnata and told me that Renfield had somehow met with some accident. He had heard him yell, and when he shol to him, found him lying on his litso on the floor, all covered with blood. I dolgen itti at adinras. Chapter Seward's diary. Let me put vnice with exactness all that happened, as well as I может remember it, since last I сделал an entry. Not a detail that I может recall dolgen be forgotten. In all calmness, I dolgen proceed. This is a reminder. Remember said translates to skazal. When I came to Renfield's komnata, I found him lying on the floor on his left side in a glittering pool of blood. When I shol to move him, it became at Adin Raz apparent that he had received some terrible injuries. There seemed none of that unity of purpose between the parts of the body which marks even lethargic sanity. As the litso was exposed, I could vidit that it was horribly bruised, as though it had been beaten against the floor. Indeed, it was from the litso wounds that the pool of blood originated. The attendant Kto was kneeling beside the body skazal to me as we turned him over. I doom it, sir, his nazad is broken. Vidit, both his right arm and leg, and the whole side of his litso are paralyzed. Kak such a thing could have happened puzzled the attendant beyond measure. He seemed quite bewildered, and his brows were gathered in as he said, "This is a reminder." Remember said translates to skazal. I can't understand the two things. He could mark his litso like that by beating his own head on the floor. I videl a young woman do it Adin Raz at the Eversfield Asylum, though anyone could lay hands on her. And I suppose he might have broke his neck by falling is of bed if he got in an awkward kink. But for the life of me, I can't imagine cuck the two things occurred. If his nazad was broke, he couldn't beat his head, and if his litso was like that, though the fall is of bed, there would be marks of it. I skazal to him, "Go to Dr. Van Helsing, and ask him to kindly prichadid zdes at Adin Ras. I want him without an instant's delay." The mushima ran off, and within a few minutes the professor, in his dressing gown and slippers, appeared. When he videl Renfield on the ground, he looked keenly at him a moment, and then turned to me. I doomit he recognized my thought in my glaza, for he skazal ochin quietly, manifestly for the ears of the attendant. "Ah, a sad accident. He will need ochin careful watching and much attention. I shall stay with you myself, but I shall first dress myself. If you will remain, I shall in a few minutes join you." The patient was сейчас breathing stertorously, and it was easy to vidit that he had suffered some terrible injury. Van Helsing returned with extraordinary celerity, bearing with him a surgical case. He had evidently been thinking and had his mind's deel of virch, for almost though he looked at the patient, he whispered to me, "Send the attendant away. We dolgen be alone with him when he becomes conscious, posle the operation." So I said, "I doom it that will do сейчас, Simmons. We have done all that we может at present. You had better eat teethvoy round, and Dr. Van Helsing will operate. Let me znite instantly if there be anything unusual anywhere." The mushima withdrew, and we sholv a strict examination of the patient. The wounds of the litso was superficial. The real injury was a depressed fracture of the skull, extending right virch through the motor area. The professor thought a moment and said, "This is a reminder. Remember or translates to ili. We dolgen reduce the pressure and get nazat to normal conditions, as far as может be. The rapidity of the suffusion shows the terrible nature of his injury. The whole motor area seems affected. The suffusion of the brain will increase quickly, so we dolgen treffin at a din ras, il it may be too late. As he was speaking, there was a soft tapping at the dved. I stole over and opened it and found in the corridor without Arthur and Quincy in pajamas and slippers. The former spoke, "This is a reminder." Remember or translates to ili. This is a reminder. Remember us translates to nas. This is a reminder. Remember, they translates to oni. I heard Dvoimushima call Virch, Dr. in Helsing, and tell him of an accident. So I woke Quincy, ili rather called for him, as he was not asleep. Things are moving too quickly and too strangely for sound sput for Luboy of Nas these times. I've been thinking that tomorrow, Noch will not vidit things as ani have been. We'll have to smatrate back and forward a malinki bolje than we have done. May we prichadit in? I nodded and held the dveri open till ani had entered. Then I closed it snova. When Quincy videl the attitude and state of the patient and noted the horrible pool on the floor, he skazal softly, "My God! Što has happened to him? Bedni devil!" I told him briefly, and added that we expected he would recover consciousness posle the operation, for a short vreme, at all events. He shol at Adin Raz and sat vniz on the edge of the bed, with Godalming beside him. We all watched in patience. "We shall wait," skazal Van Helsing, "just long enough to fix the best spot for trephining, so that we may most quickly and perfectly remove the blood clot, for it is evident that the hemorrhage is increasing." This is a reminder. Remember or translates to ili. This is a reminder. Remember they translates to ani. This is a reminder. Remember us translates to nas. The minutes during which we waited passed with fearful slowness. I had a horrible sinking in my heart, and from Van Helsing's litso I gathered that he felt some fear, ili apprehension, as to što was to prichadit. I dreaded the words that Renfield might speak. I was positively afraid to doom it. But the conviction of što was coming was on me, as I have read of men, kto have heard the death watch. The bedni man's breathing came in uncertain gasps. Each instant he seemed as though he would open his glaza and speak, but then would follow a prolonged stertorous breath, and he would relapse of a bolia fixed insensibility. Inured as I was to sick beds and death, this suspense grew and grew upon me. I could almost hear the beating of my own heart, and the blood surging through my temples sounded like blows from a hammer. The silence finally became agonizing. I looked at my companions, one posle another, and videl from ich flushed faces and damp brows that I knew were enduring equal torture. There was a nervo-nas suspense over us all, as though overhead some dread bell would peal as powerfully when we dolgen least expect it. At last there came a vreme when it was evident that the patient was sinking fast. He might die at Luboy moment. I looked Virch at the professor and caught his glaza fixed on mine. His litso was sternly set as he spoke. "There is niet vreme to lose. His words may be worth many lives. I have been thinking so as I stood zdесь. It may be there is a soul at stake. We shall operate just above the ear." Without another word, he still the operation. For a few moments the breathing continued to be stertorous. Then there came a breath so prolonged that it seemed as though it would tear open his chest. Suddenly his glaza opened and became fixed in a wild, helpless stare. This was continued for a few moments. Then it softened with glad surprise, and from the lips came a sigh of relief. He moved convulsively, and as he did so said, "In the next paragraph, we are introducing a new word. The word them translates to ich. I'll be quiet, doctor. Tell ich to take off the straight waistcoat. I have had a terrible dream, and it has left me so weak that I cannot move. What's wrong with my litso? It feels all swollen and it smarts dreadfully." He tried to turn his head, but even with the effort his glaza seemed to grow glassy snova, so I gently put it nazad. Then Van Helsing skazal in a quiet, grave tone, "This is a reminder. Remember us translates to nas. Tell nas tvoj dream, Mr. Renfield." As he heard the voice his litso brightened through its mutilation, and he said, "That is Dr. Van Helsing. Kak haroshi it is of you to be zdесь. Give me some water, my lips are dry, and I shall try to tell you. I dreamed." He stopped and seemed fainting. I called quietly to Quincy, "The brandy, it is in my study, quick!" He flew and returned with a glass, the decanter of brandy and a carafe of water. We moistened the parched lips and the patient quickly revived. It seemed, however, that his bedny, injured brain had been working in the interval, for, when he was quite conscious, he looked at me piercingly with an agonized confusion which I shall never forget, and said, "This is a reminder. Remember they translates to Oni." I dolgen net deceive myself. It was no dream, but all a grim reality. Then his glaza roved round the komnata, as Ani caught sight of the two figures sitting patiently on the edge of the bed he shol on. "This is a reminder. Remember, or translates to Ili. This is a reminder. Remember them translates to Ich. If I were not sure already, I would znat from them." For an instant his glaza closed, not with pain despite but voluntarily, as though he were bringing all his faculties to bear. When he opened Ich he skazal hurriedly, and with bolia energy than he had yet displayed. "This is a reminder. Remember or translates to Ili. Quick, doctor, quick! I am dying. I feel that I have but a few minutes, and then I dolgen iti nazat to death, or worse, wet my lips with brandy, snova. I have something that I dolgen say do I die, ili do my bedny crushed brain dies anyhow. Thank you. It was that noche posle you left me when I implored you to let me iti away. I couldn't speak then, for I felt my tongue was tied, but I was as sane then, except in that sposob, as I am si chess. I was in an agony of despair for a long vreme posle you left me, it seemed hours. Then there came a sudden peace to me. My brain seemed to become cool snova, and I realized gde I was. I heard the dogs bark behind Nash house, but not gde he was. As he spoke, Van Helsing's glaza never blinked, but his hand came ease and met mine and gripped it hard. He did not, however, betray himself. He nodded slightly and said, "Go on," in a low voice. Renfield proceeded. He came virch to the window in the mist, as I had seen him often do, but he was solid then, not a ghost, and his glaza were fierce like a man's when angry. He was laughing with his red mouth. The sharp white teeth glinted in the moonlight when he turned to smatret nazad over the belt of trees, to где the dogs were barking. I wouldn't ask him to prichadit in at first, though I knew he wanted to, just as he had wanted all along. Then he began promising me things, not in words but by doing them. He was interrupted by a word from the professor. "How?" "This is a reminder. Remember them translates to Ich. By making Ich happen, just as he used to send in the flies when the sun was shining, veliki big fat ones with steel and sapphire on ich wings, and big moths in the noche with skull and crossbones on ich backs." Van Helsing nodded to him as he whispered to me unconsciously, "The Acherontia aetetropus of the Sphinges, what you call the death's head moth." The patient shol on without stopping. In the next paragraph we are introducing a new word. The word one translates to adin. This is a reminder. Remember them translates to ich. This is a reminder. Remember they translates to ani. Then he began to whisper, "Rats, rats, rats. Hundreds, thousands, millions of ich, and every adin a life, and dogs to eat ich, and cats too. All lives, all red blood, with years of life in it, and not merely buzzing flies." I laughed at him, for I wanted to vidich what he could do. Then the dogs howled, away beyond the dark trees in his house. He beckoned me to the window. I got virch and looked ease, and he raised his hands and seemed to call ease without using Luboy words. A dark mass spread over the grass, coming on like the shape of a flame of fire, and then he moved the mist to the right and left, and I could vidit that there were thousands of rats with iglaza blazing red, like his, tolka smaller. He held virch his hand, and Ani all stopped, and I thought he seemed to be saying, "All these lives will I give you, and many bolia and greater, through countless ages, if you will fall knees and worship me." And then a red cloud, like the color of blood, seemed to close over my glaza, and though I knew what I was doing, I found myself opening the sash and saying to him, "Come in, Lord and Master!" The rats were all gone, but he slid the komnata through the sash, though it was tolka open an inch wide, just as the moon herself has often prichadit in through the tiniest crack, and has stood domi in all her size and splendor. His voice was weaker, so I moistened his lips with the brandy snova, and he continued, but it seemed as though his memory had gone on, working in the interval, for his story was further advanced. I was to call him nazat to the point, but Van Helsing whispered to me, "Let him iti on. Do not interrupt him, he cannot iti nazad, and maybe could not proceed at all if adin ras he lost the thread of his thought." He proceeded, "This is a reminder. Remember one translates to adin. All day I waited to hear from him, but he did not send me anything, not even a blowfly, and when the moon got virch, I was pretty angry with him. When he slid in through the window, though it was shut and did not even knock, I got mad with him. He sneered at me, and his white litso looked ease of the mist with his red glaza gleaming, and he shell on as though he owned the whole place, and I was nietadin. He didn't even smell the same as he shol by me. I couldn't hold him. I thought that, somehow, Mrs. Harker had prichadit the room. This is a reminder. Remember them translates to ich. This is a reminder. Remember they translates to ani. The two men sitting on the bed stood virch and came over, standing behind him so that he could not vidit ich, but Deani could hear better. Ani were both silent, but the professor started and quivered. His litso, however, grew grimmer and sterner still. Renfield shol on without noticing. This is a reminder.